Some mainstream papers, the Times and the Telegraph, have ventured into this area, but we've seen a steady silence from the BBC, whilst of course they have privately promoted adoption programmes for children. And I think that Senator Sevray is really putting the BBC on the spot there and suggesting is the reason the BBC is not investigating, because the paedophiles are already at work in the BBC themselves. I'll just come back on, we'll come back on to that in a minute. I'm just going to put up now a photo of our guest this afternoon, Mr. Ben Fellows. This is an article from the Express where they ran a story where Ben was recounting his experiences as being a child actor. And in the article, Ben is talking about running a gauntlet of paedophiles at the BBC, and he's claiming that the entertainment industry was rife with sex abuse. So we should have Ben on the line now. Are you there, Ben?
Yes, I am, Brian. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, and I can hear you clearly. What's the weather like in London then?
It's pretty miserable, actually. It's very foggy, and it's quite mild, but it's that warm air hitting the cold air, so we've got lots of fog at the moment.
Okay, I had to ask that because it's a little bit of light-heartedness on the programme, What's the Weather Doing? And I was very pleased to see you looked out the window, which is, of course, what we do down here. Now, serious stuff, Ben. Obviously, many people in the country at the moment are really shocked. I hear it in my local community where they are saying, what on earth is going on? I think many people have believed that sort of paedophiles and child abuse was something that always happened somewhere else to other people. They have believed that it's been something that happens at the bottom of the social chain, and now all of a sudden they are hearing in a matter of a few days that not only has it been happening at the heart of the BBC, but of course we've also now got indications that it's happening at the heart of Westminster. So I'll give you an open introduction. What can you tell us about your experiences then within the media industry and as a child actor?
Well, I think, I was lucky in a way because I was a jobbing child actor. I started at the age of 10 at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford. And I dotted around and did various TV series and theatre series. I wasn't in one show for, say, 6 or 7 years. So I had a good overview of what the industry is like. And every single job I ever went for, pretty much almost all auditions, which is another thing that I'm quite passionate about, because auditions need to be chaperoned as well, not just, say, the job you do. They all had a sexual context to it when I was a child. So, for example, if I'd go for a commercial, quite often or not, you were asked to take your top off. Now, I'm a boy. I was 10, 12 years old. That's not a problem. So you take your top off. And they say, can you actually just take your bottoms off as well and pretend you're on the beach? So you do that because you're a kid and you're playing. You're there very innocently trying to get a commercial, which would actually pay quite a bit of money and stuff like that. So you're willing to do whatever they say. If you don't do it, they'll just go, thanks a lot, and get someone else to do it. So you do these things. So it leaves you in a very vulnerable position. And of course, you don't know where these photos or videotape is going to go. And on one occasion, my mother was contacted by the police. It was a big commercial that I'd been for the previous week, and said that the photos that they'd taken had been used in a paedophile catalogue and had been passed around from the production company to outside paedophiles, and that's how they heard about it. Would we be prepared to go to court and be witnesses? So, of course, we said yes. I mean, we didn't hear anything else about it, because I think they had 200 or 300 boys, and I was just one of those. So it's everywhere, and, of course, people are shocked, because this is one of the most trusted institutions in the country, and it's at the heart of the BBC. Now, to me, that's not news. So what I wanted to do was just basically say to people, look, this isn't just the BBC, this is the wider industry. I'm no longer an actor, really, so I'm not interested in having a career in the business. So I'll tell you quite frankly what my experience was like. Of course, people who are still actors in the business, people who are still wanting to have to be on television or work for these organisations, they're not going to come out and say anything, because we all know that you don't bite the hand that feeds. So I'm quite happy to come out and say, well, look, you know, I've got a different career now. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a journalist. I have no interest in these people whatsoever, so I can come out, and I've made several complaints now about BBC staff. I slept with BBC staff. I'm not, like women, I'm not gay. I think if I was gay, I'd have had an even tougher time, as friends of mine did. However, I was on the outside of this sort of circle, I suppose you'd like to call it. And so over the years, you get to know everybody, and they offer you drugs, they offer you alcohol. This is all between the ages of sort of 10 and 17. And you do it, and you take it because you want to be involved with these people. These are very powerful people. Most are very famous people. And you think that by doing this, you are going to have some sort of advantage, because they might introduce you to somebody. For example, the BBC producer, who I had a one-night stand with, effectively, basically promised me that she'd introduce me to Blue Peter, to be a Blue Peter presenter. Well, back in the 90s, Blue Peter was like one of the top shows on television, and if you were a Blue Peter presenter, you had sort of arrived, really. Your career was kind of set. So that was a very big draw for me. Of course, after I'd slept with her and stuff, I'd never heard from her again, pretty much. And that was it. So, you know, you're used and then abused, and you go along because, you know, I thought I was streetwise and stuff, but you're a kid, you don't know what you're doing. Adults know exactly what they're doing, especially when they're 40 or plus or whatever. I mean, so, you know, you're kind of led down this very sort of murky, dark tunnel. But on the outside, it's wonderful because it's the entertainment industry, so no one's going to believe you. No one's going to believe that this very famous personality has just basically given you a line of coke in their dressing room, and has asked you to have sex with them. No one believes that, so you didn't complain. There wasn't a culture of saying, I'll keep a list in a diary and then I'll complain about it later. You didn't do that. It wasn't that kind of culture, especially at the BBC. And the phrase was really sort of, what goes on in the BBC stays in the BBC. And this is what comes of sort of corporate incest that the BBC suffers from, and other organisations in the entertainment industry, whereby they only hire people from a very small pool of universities. Well, of course, when you do that, you can get a paedophile in, and we all know that when you get one paedophile in, or child abuser, they will then let in others. And in the BBC specifically, you didn't get hired because of what you knew, you got hired because of who you knew. And that's a very famous phrase in the BBC, and it's not what you know, it's who you know that counts. And that's because what they were doing is building a protection mechanism whereby anything, whether it was drugs, it was prostitution, and there was a lot of that going on, whether it was underage drinking, you know, and stuff like that, and child abuse, paedophilia. This now is a culture where nobody complains, and in fact, if you did complain, you wouldn't be hired again, you'd lose your job, and people would come out against you. I mean, even this week, when other journalists from, when we've got the mainstream interested, have been contacting the BBC, asking them about my story, and some people are saying, I wasn't even on that show, even though there I am recorded on the show. You know, it's ridiculous. So the kind of thing is that because this is such an emotive topic, that people will just distance themselves, even if, you know, I've had private conversations with people who have said, yeah, I'm on your side, I'm with you, I just can't do it publicly because I don't know how this is going to turn out for me, and they're still in the industry, and that's how this is kept a secret. I mean, you know, so I'm not surprised that people are shocked.
Right. Ben, one of the things that we're going to talk some pretty serious subjects this afternoon. People who haven't heard of you before, I imagine what's going to be going in their minds is, well, who is this man, and how do we know he's reliable? How do we trust what he says? Is he reliable witness? I'm being, you know, upfront with this because we are talking some subjects which are very serious. So what I'd like you to do is, could you just, you know, take your time, but just give us a little bit about your history. You've become a child actor. How does that actually happen, and who do you come into contact with as you start to move through? You're selected, presumably, at some stage, and then you start to go through training. Could you just give us a little bit of that background, and then we can move on through some of the other things you've experienced?
Well, for me, it started when I was just coming up to my 10th birthday, and we saw an advertisement, the family, in the local paper. I lived in Solihull in Birmingham, so it was the Solihull Times, and it was for a Saturday morning drama class. And it got me out of my sister's hair. My mother could go and do shopping, and I would go to drama class where you do improvisation, you do face painting, and you basically just have fun as a kid. And I loved it. I lapped it up. 6 months after joining the RSC, they were looking all over the country for a mixed race boy to play opposite Hugh Quarshie in Adrian Noble's production of Macbeth, which was his first sort of big job as artistic director. And so I was asked if I'd like to go and audition because my drama school had been approached by the RSC, and I said it would be great. And they just said to me, "Look, go. It'll be a great experience. You'll see what a real audition is like." Because I'd never been to any audition before. It wasn't as if I was wanting to be an actor. This was just a Saturday morning thing to have fun with, as you do as a child. So I went along. I said my audition speech as my drama teacher and I rehearsed a couple of days before, and we got a call in the evening and said that they would like me to do it. There wasn't that many back then in 1986 or so. So I think they'd seen about 800 boys, and so I got the part, and so that started the process of me being a child actor. I went to rehearsals. You'd meet all the other actors. Well, one thing about the RSC, and I'd like to make this really clear, is that they have excellent child management. In other words, when your parents took you to the stage door, the chaperone met you then and there, and they never left your side while you were at the RSC. It was made aware to us, and I remember quite specifically being told by my chaperone never to be in any other actor's dressing room, male or female, and have them close the door without a chaperone being present and stuff like that. They took you from your dressing room to the stage, so much so that it got annoying. I was a kid, I could go up and down the stage and back to my dressing room on my own. It got quite annoying, but the point is that they were doing their job, and they were excellent for it. And in fact, I've just received a letter from the RSC, again, very sensible, telling me how their procedures are basically really very good still. That but however, if I've got any issues and stuff like that, I can bring them up. A sensible conversation about this. Because the RSC know that you don't know who you're letting in as other actors into your organisation. These could be very famous people. They're all very nice people, nothing untoward, but you don't know who they are. And that's what people have kind of got to realise about the BBC, is that you've watched people on telly, but that's not who they are. That's a persona, a personality that they put forward. But we don't know what they get up to in their private life, and perhaps we shouldn't. But the point is, we need one step outside of the box as well when we listen to these people and we watch these people. Just say, well, look, they are real people. We don't know who they are. They could get up to anything, and we've kind of missed that. So once I was at the RSC, it went very quickly from there, because obviously I was featured in all the news.
Can I just briefly come in there? So for viewers and listeners, the RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, I think is what you're describing here.
Yes, Royal Shakespeare Company, and so from there you get to know very quickly how the industry works. I was given some very sound advice by actor Hugh Quarshie, who's in Casualty or Holby now, and he said to me, "This business is soul destroying. Don't come into it." He said, "If you want to come into it, go back to school, get your exam, go to university, and then in your 20s, when you're an adult, you can come into the business." Well, I didn't listen, did I? I was a kid and I was very eager, but he was absolutely right. He was spot on. The entertainment industry is no place for children. So after the RSC, I was featured in lots of newspapers and stuff like that. I was being offered jobs. I did 12 nights in Birmingham for the Birmingham Rep. I did big tours of 15 streets, with Catherine Crookson's 15 Streets for the Alexandra Theatre, and big tours up and down the country, 9-month tours. And I was, a kid. So from the age of sort of 13, by the time I'd sort of really properly got an agent, that's the other thing that you need. You need an agent to be able to get auditions. And I signed with an agent called Royal Management in London. So I was coming down to London by that time, pretty much on my own, on the train at age 30. My mum would drop me off on the train. I would be picked up at the other end of the train, and and I'd go to these auditions. So you need an agent, and then it's just a matter of going to auditions, doing your best, and hopefully trying to get jobs. And I did. I worked in many musicals. I worked on lots of television programs. I was a little bit on EastEnders. I did Second Thoughts with James Bolam and Julia Sawalha, many other things. And my biggest employer was the BBC, I have to say. So I did many TV shows for the BBC. But because I wasn't a regular on any particular show, I would do an episode here and an episode there. And someone said to me the other day, well, I've looked on IMBD and I can't see really what you've done. I said, well, IMBD didn't exist when I was doing it in the early 90s. And I don't have an agent now, so you need an agent to put things up on IMBD, So, in my day, I travelled around. I went all around the country with different shows and theatre projects. I worked with very famous people. I worked with very famous directors. And when I mean very famous, I'm talking sort of world-class musical theatre directors and producers. These weren't sort of low-budget shows or profit share shows, as some people call them. These were major musicals and major productions, and the same with television. So, I've got extensive experience as a child actor, but it was over a wide range of situations. For example, I did a lot of modelling when I was a child, and I was in Kay's catalogue and various other catalogues and stuff like that, because I was a cute, mixed-race kid with a nice smile, and that, unfortunately, attracts the wrong kind of attention in this business.
Right. I'm going to keep you carrying on through your career, but I just want to ask you one thing. We're seeing quite a bit in the mainstream papers and the media at the moment. When people are talking particularly about the Savile affair, they're very often saying, well, of course, back then that's the way it was. We had groupie girls. There was a much more liberal attitude. It was the swinging 60s. It was the swinging 70s. And to my mind, there's a sort of hint that the media is trying to drift people's opinions and views into thinking, well, of course, there was bad stuff that went on back then, but it's not happening now. Now, you're talking the period, I think you mentioned 1986 there, you're talking early 90s. So in your experience in the 80s and 90s, we won't go into too much detail at this stage, but just generally, in your experience in the 80s and 90s, how do you feel? Is it going on, or was it going on then as opposed to just back in the 60s and 70s?
Yeah, absolutely. The period of 1986, well, the period of when I was from 10 years old to being, let's say, 17, just before the age of consent, I had sex with 5 or 6 women who were all in their 40s, or who were all either producers, directors, casting directors, influential people within the industry. This cuts across everything. And also, I was given drugs and alcohol. This is all underage. I was going into Stringfellows at age 14. I had an open invitation to go to Stringfellows. I wasn't the only child in there. That's the point,
Right. Okay, right, thanks for that. Now, your career at some stage started to take an interesting direction, because you appear to have moved away from, I will say, ordinary acting into undercover work. Was that part of your acting career, or was that something that happened separately?
No, it was part of it. It sort of crossed over, really. When I was 17, when I was 18, a family friend basically said, look, who worked for Central Television in Birmingham, said that the Cook Report were looking for someone to help them out, and would Ben be interested? Well, this family friend worked at a television company. This was a good opportunity for me. I'd already worked for Central as an actor. Excuse me. Sorry. I'd already worked for Central Television as an actor, so this was a great opportunity, and I thought, yeah. So he introduced me to the producers of the Cook Report, who were working on a particular programme which was about cash for questions, political lobbyists influencing MPs to ask questions in the House of Parliament, etc. And I walked through the door, the producer looked at me and she said, "You're perfect." And then it was just a matter of having a general conversation. But then I was in because of the way I looked. And the way I looked was, I was 17 going on to be 18, but I looked like I was 14, 15. That was the whole point of it, is that this businessman that they were setting up to have this sting operation, and this businessman needed a young assistant, because there was a lot of talk at the time about politicians having these young assistants. And when I'm talking about young assistants, I'm talking about 16, 15, 17, really young guys. And so they thought it might grease the wheels and move them further into the sting if I was part of it. And the reason that they wanted a mixed race child was because Ian Greer, who was the political lobbyist involved in Cash for Questions, had a mixed race boyfriend in his 40s, I think, or 30s at that time. And so if the businessman that Central were putting in had a mixed race boy, then it would help. And what I was told was to say, if you're ever asked by anybody how old you are to tell them that you're 15 years old. So when I met Ian Greer, and he, hugged me and rubbed himself up and down me. When I met Ken Clark, and and he touched me, and all that kind of stuff. We'd already had the conversation that I was 15. Ken Clark knew how old I was. Ian Greer knew how old I was. So it wasn't like they were groping or touching someone who they thought was 18. They knew I was 15, or that's what they believed, and that's the important thing, I think, in this. So that's how I kind of got involved, because I wasn't afraid of cameras or wearing covert cameras. The incident with Ken Clark was filmed. It is on videotape, and the Cook Report has that now. So hopefully that will come out in the next few days when people actually start doing some digging.
Right, okay, I'm going to come back to that incident, just because I know, excuse me, Cook Report, just so that we can be very clear, maybe younger viewers might not be fully aware. What sort of material did the Cook Report cover altogether? Can you just give us a sort of synopsis of the Cook Report and how it went about its business?
The Cook Report is an investigative journalist program. It's actually probably the best investigative journalist program this country's ever produced. Roger Cook was a senior investigative journalist, made his name in Australia. He'd come over to this country. He was, a crime correspondent, I think, for a time. He was a big player in journalism. And he had a series called The Cook Report. That's what as part of his career path and what have you. And they did wonderful stories. They did, stories that sort of people wouldn't be interested, wouldn't touch. So they did stories on gun running and buying nuclear material. When when getting that sort of stuff, the Cold War was still on at that point, so getting nuclear material was like a really big deal, proving sort of that terrorism existed and stuff like that, and that these people, you could go out and buy actually nuclear material. So it was very challenging stories. They weren't afraid of anything, the Cook Report, and it was a local regional program coming out of Central Television in Birmingham that got networked because it was so good. And so Roger Cook became very famous, and of course he did this doorstepping. Famously, he'd turn up at your doorstep with a camera and obviously ran the risk of being hit or pushed out of the way and shoved. But he would pursue people, and that just doesn't happen anymore, which I think is why all this is kind of taken place a lot, because we've allowed journalists and journalism to be perverted in some way where, it can be hidden and behind closed doors. It never comes out. Roger Cook would have beaten this down years ago had he been given the opportunity to. So it was a very good programme. And it was very exciting to be a part of that, even a very small part of that, which I was. I wasn't privy to the overall idea of the program. I just knew the bit that I was involved in, and which is how the Cook Report worked. It was very compartmentalised. One group of people working on a Cook Report story didn't know what another group was working on. It was very secretive. It was actually almost like being, a secret agent or something like that. You couldn't even get into the building without various codes and passes that were additional to the ones you'd need to get into the building with anyway. So the Cook Report was an extremely good investigative journalism program that really should be still on to this day, but unfortunately, because it got cancelled, it wasn't on. So it wasn't afraid of shining a light onto these people. And Cash for Questions just was one of those topics that they covered.
Right. So that we're clear on this, you mentioned it was operating from Central Television. What does that actually mean? Was this part of BBC, or was this independent but feeding to other people?
Oh, no. This is Central Television is an independent, or was an independent broadcaster on the ITV network, which is where the Cook Report was on. And what would happen is that years ago, television was broken apart, and you would have Meridian in one part of the country, Southampton Television in Southampton broadcasting, Central Television in the Midlands, and they broadcast to their regions. However, if they come up with a really great programme, it would then be networked. So, for example, Supermarket Sweep came out of Meridian, I think in Southampton, and it was networked. So it started off as a regional programme and then moved into a national programme for a later series. Well, the Cook Report did the same thing. It started off being regional and then it moved into being networked. And of course, networked meant the entire country. And so that's how it got its programmes out.
Right, okay. Now, I'm going to cut across to another subject and then bring people back. Because at the moment, what I'm doing is and you're doing a great job, Ben. So keep going. We're setting the scene. We're having a look at who you are and what your experience is. And you're no ordinary actor. You've just been taking us through the fact that you have real experience in investigative media. And as you've said, the Cook Report went into some very dark and at times dangerous subjects. So, in my opinion anyway, you've got some pretty unique experience there. But you put those skills to good use recently with the G4S, the security firm that was handling the Olympics. And many people, now the Olympics are over, will have forgotten, I think, the fact that G4S, which was paid millions of pounds of money to provide security, was then failing, and you came up and revealed some of the disastrous things that were going on with G4S. How did you actually get set up to do that G4S thing? Was that you using your Cook skills?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The Olympics was coming to town. It's the biggest event in the world, and I just went, well, look, let's sign up for security and let's see how well they do it. I was already interested in G4S anyway. I'd heard a number of scare stories about them. I wanted to do an investigation into them. I didn't really want to go and join G4S, the organisation, and spend years working there just to see how good or bad they were. So the Olympics gave me a unique opportunity to join in a very short amount of time. I joined, do the Olympics training, see what the Olympics was like, and try and get an overview of the company. However, when I went there, I expected to be one of many undercover journalists to be involved. And it turns out that I was the only one. And I really saw the shambles of what they were trying to do, and it was ridiculous. It was insane. So I had to come out and say, look, I know this great event's about to happen. It's a wonderful sporting event, but the X-ray machines operators aren't trained properly. The metal detectors don't work. So, instead of having all these missiles on buildings and snipers and aircraft carriers and all that kind of stuff, a terrorist, all they would really need to do is queue up. And basically, that's what I said. And then it went on from there. And obviously, it took off on the alternative media first, and then moved into the mainstream. However, on the mainstream, I wasn't credited at all, or neither was the alternative media accredited at all in whistleblowing the story. And in fact, we watched a Sky News report where someone was almost pretending to be me, rather than them interview me. So on that occasion, I was kept sort of very much behind the scenes of mainstream media. Everyone in the alternative media, I think, knew about the story. They were interested, and it spread virally across the internet, which is the power of the alternative media. But the mainstream didn't really do anything. On this occasion, it's very different. Once we broke the story on the 21st Century Wire, Patrick Henningson's blog. It's taken about a week or two, but the mainstream media are now calling me up and interviewing me about my experience here, because it casts light over the wider wider picture of what's going on in the industry.
Yeah. Now, of course, your work with the G4S thing, we saw absolutely that what you came along and talked about was happening. That, as you say, did appear in the mainstream media. So credit where it's due, Ben. Your work was spot on, and eventually the information and the truth that you were bringing out was so powerful that the mainstream media did have to react to it. I can't remember the MP's name, but I know that at the time there was one particular MP who said on record, when there was a debate about whether there was a problem with G4S, said words to the effect, of course there's a debate because the alternative media have been talking about G4S and the failings for weeks. And that for me was a very powerful indication of not only what you were saying, but the fact that alternative media is now starting to get out information which either the mainstream media can't or won't get out. Just to clarify, did any of the mainstream media or press outlets interview you at all with G4S or not?
Oh, did they? I can't remember actually. Maybe they did, but they didn't run the story. Yeah, I mean, no one ran my story anyway, about it.
Right.
I was everyone and anyone I could get hold of to do things. But yeah, I can't remember actually now. Maybe I did speak to mainstream journalists, but they didn't run it anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Well, they ran it, but not with you included, because it certainly hit the headlines, didn't it? If we bring us back to the subject at the moment, you've actually also spoken to the Times recently about what you know has been going on. Can you tell us a little bit about this? This is one of the key parts of the story that was on Patrick Henningson's 21st Century Wire site, which has caused a huge impact. How did the Times get involved with what you've been seeing and talking about?
Well, when I wrote the article originally, we put it up on the website. It then got picked up by Guido Fawkes and went viral, and along with many other sites as well. So the Times got in touch. You know, what we've got to kind of understand is that the Times murdered Empire, and they were wanting to beat up on the BBC for, you know, basically what the BBC did was they cancelled a Newsnight production because of their Christmas schedule. That's a very important thing to understand, is their Christmas schedule. So, when the Times guy, Jack Mulvern, is a senior veteran correspondent at the Times, when he called up and said, look, I'd like to do an interview, and they said, look, we will do a very big showing, you know, we'll have pictures and stuff, it will be a great article. I jumped at the chance, and I know I was going to appear on the UK column last week, but what they said to me was like, look, can we have it as an exclusive? No money was ever mentioned. It was just a simple exclusive, a gentleman's agreement, if you will. I wouldn't do any other interviews until the Times had run it on the Saturday. So I sat with Jack Mulvern on all day Thursday afternoon and told him my story. And he was very interested and what have you, and said, well, look, don't worry, we're either going to run the story with names or without names. So, but we're definitely going to run the story. And they had the exclusive until Saturday last week. Well, Saturday came and the story didn't run. And so I started inquiring with contacts I have in the Murdoch Empire. And they basically said, look, they're not going to do it because somebody you named is running Sky Television's, pretty much, well, not running it, but is the main feature of their Christmas schedule, which is exactly the same thing as happened to the BBC. So they were criticising the BBC for pulling a programme. But when it came to their opportunity to run the story, a story about child abuse and paedophilia in the entertainment industry, they also pulled their story because of a Sky Television Christmas schedule. Now, why is this Christmas schedule so important in television? Well, the Christmas schedule is the most watched schedule in the whole year. It's winter, it gets dark early, people stay in and they watch a lot of television. So it's very important for ratings. But like the BBC, and now like Sky, ratings come before the care and protection of children. And also, because it's the Murdoch Empire, you've got the Sun newspaper, which proclaim that paedophile hunters for the country, except when a paedophile works in their organisation, or a child abuser works in their organisation, they keep it quiet. They do exactly the same thing as the BBC, which proves my point that this isn't just a BBC issue. This is an industry issue. Sky is actually exactly the same way. Anyway, so I wrote another article. I'd had an interview with the Times and the reasons, as I believe them, from my contact in the Times and the Murdoch Empire, why they weren't running it. And of course, this caused uproar within the Murdoch Empire. Rupert Murdoch is personally now involved and has told the Times to run the story. That was Tuesday of this week. So Jack Mulvern suddenly has to get back on the case and start ringing everybody up again and confirming what I've said. He even rang my mother, and he didn't want to speak to him. And when I told him that on the previous Friday said, look, my mum doesn't want to speak to you, she's not interested. She actually then, because she was doing a lot of knitting and, you know, she had a personal line, he then hounded my mother, got her on the phone. And of course, she confirmed certain things to him and told him certain things, that obviously the same things that I had told him, you know, about my experience and stuff. So we knew they were running it at that point. It was just a matter of when it's going to come out. And every day we've sort of been looking for it. But we believe it's going to come out on Saturday now, which is interesting. But of course, now I'm telling everybody about it. I've done various interviews with mainstream newspapers, including the Telegraph and the Express. So it's definitely out there now. It's getting out there.
Right, but if I just get this right, what seems to have come out, we learned that children have been and clearly are still being very badly abused, and then what we're not seeing is that mainstream media is getting stuck in to expose the abusers and bring them to book. What your particular story is highlighting is that we're in the middle of yet another media battle where there's perhaps a bit of point scoring, that the Murdoch empire has been beaten up over phone hacking, and now there's leverage over the fact that paedophiles have been found inside the BBC, and so that's being used back the other way. Do you see it as being this media war over the subject, rather than getting to grips with who is abusing the children?
That's what the media does. This is actually one of the problems with the media, is instead of looking at the subject matter, they use it as a point scoring exercise. And this happens through papers. One paper won't like another paper, so they'll look at their stories and they'll do a point scoring exercise, write some articles that embarrasses that paper, or that proprietor's the owner of the newspaper, the proprietor. This happens all the time. Murdoch Empire is very famous for that, and they do it very well because they have so much gravity in media, because they own so much many outlets. They can really do it very well. So this is something that we know, and it goes on. But one of the reasons also that they're not covering it is they're afraid to, because of the libel laws in this country are so powerful. And it almost feels like those laws have been set up to protect paedophiles. As more I'm looking into this story, as the weeks unfold and what have you, I'm finding more and more levels that aren't there to protect children or out paedophiles. It seems to be, I'm saying seems, that really organisations turn a blind eye, they won't say things, or in fact they actually legislate for the paedophile rather than the protection of children. So the priorities are all skew-if. So the media is very afraid. Everyone I've spoken to is scared to mention people's names. Now, what was interesting about the Times interview, if had it have come out at the time, would have been me revealing people's names. Look, I'm not afraid of these people. You know, I don't want to work in their industry anymore. I'm not scared of their repercussions. You can sue me all you like. The truth is the truth. You know, Ken Clark sent out an email to people who own blogs and stuff, asking them to take it down and expecting that would happen. That's a politician putting the Cabinet Office to work, censoring the alternative media because they're telling the truth about something.
Ben, if I may, just interject there, so that we're being absolutely down the line on this, you're obviously making very, very serious allegations, because we're talking about inappropriate sexual behaviour in your case at the time, with people believing that you were actually underage, and you've mentioned Mr. Clark's name. What I'd like to do for viewers and listeners is actually read out Mr. Clark's statement, because I think this is very important. He's saying that your comments are a complete fabrication and highly defamatory. He's never been involved in any incidents of this kind. He was not involved in Cash for Questions. At the time he was a minister and therefore could not ask questions. He's firmly heterosexual. And like most parliamentarians, he vaguely knew Ian Greer but had no dealings with him. And he ends by saying the most charitable interpretation is that this is a case of mistaken identity. Now, we wanted, of course, to put across Mr. Clark's response, and it's only right that that should be made known. So he is saying that you've got a case of mistaken identity. What's your reply to that?
Well, let's look at the letter. He says that he's not homosexual. Never said he was. We've not accused him of being homosexual in any way. What I've accused him of is groping me in an office of a political lobbyist. I haven't accused him of being involved in cash for questions, but he was in the office when I went to visit Ian Greer. To put this meeting in context, the production team had met various politicians and what have you, and I was sent with an envelope to Ian Greer telling him good news that the company was going to hire him and we were going to pay him cash the first instalment. So I was put in a cab, sent round the corner to Victoria from the Hyde Park residence where we were staying as a production team, and I delivered this news to Ian Greer. When I went into the office, obviously I spoke to reception first. She said yes, called on the phone, said you can go up. Went up the stairs to a big reception room, and Ian Greer's office was off that. I handed in the letter. Now, when I walked through the door, there's Ken Clark in the office. I don't know what they were talking about. I don't know why Ken Clark was there, but he was. Ian Greer introduced him to me as, this is Ken Clark. You know, so it's not a case of mistaken identity because he was there. He asked me how old I was, who I was, so I told him. He knew me as Ben Worrell, which is important because that was my my pseudonym, as it were. So I told him. He asked me about what I hoped to be and what I wanted to do, and I had my story. I was an actor doing a part here. This was kind of a real thing, a real situation. They offered me a couple of drinks. It was whiskey. I found the first one because I was nervous, and then I sipped the second one. I don't think I finished it. However, I went into that situation with a covert camera in a briefcase, and I put that on the table, and so I'd filmed the entire scene. And so Ken Clark and Ian Greer and I were chit-chatting in his. Very pleasant. They're very pleasant people. There's nothing nasty going on. And Ken Clark turned round and literally put his hand on my genitals over my trousers. Just left it there for about 5 seconds. I was stunned. He pulled it away and carried on his conversation like it was the most natural thing in the world. Now, I've told this story to people for years, and people go, oh, okay, well, then, and no one really believes it and what have you. And then when we I was doing the articles, so that's the context of it. When the panorama came out, and obviously there's a guy sitting there saying, Jimmy Savile just put his hand on my genitals, left it there for a little while, took it off. Well, that's exactly what I'd written about the week before. That's exactly what happened to me with Ken Clark. So I'm not accusing Ken Clark of being gay. I'm not accusing him of being cash for questions. He is a minister, or was a minister, and he was in a very powerful political lobbyist office, so he needs to answer those questions. In actual fact, from the tenor of the email, I think they're actually most concerned with that, actually, rather than him having a grope.
Right, okay, so you're absolutely standing by your allegations. And Ben, at the moment, of course, we've got police investigations going on into of course, Jimmy Savile, but it does appear that under Operation U-Tree, which is the name of the Savile operation, that's beginning to expand. Have you actually had contact with the police, and have you made complaints about what's happened to you and what you know?
Yeah, no, not yet. We're actually working that out right now. Because I think it is important to contact Operation U-Tree, and given the experiences that I have, so we'll be doing that in the next few days. We're making complaints to the BBC officially through the BBC Complaints Department about members of staff, even though I do know that the 9 members of staff that basically they're talking about being investigated, most of those the people that I've accused. So I'll be making official complaints through the BBC, not just having journalists call them up and accuse them over through a paper or something. So yeah, I will be talking to Operation U-Tree at some point. Of course, if they want to contact me sooner, then I'm quite happy to talk about it. I've also said to people that I'm quite happy to sign an affidavit about my experiences, especially with Ken Clark, and to testify that in that office when I was there. He even joked. He said, that Ian Greer had a parliamentary bell in his office so that he'd know when to go back and vote. Well, to go back to the House of Commons and vote. Well, this is detail now, and things. How would I know that? Had I not been there, had he not said that?
Right, and the other question I'd like to ask you is, have you ever received any money for any of the stories and informations you're putting forward?
No, absolutely not. I've been very clear about this. Even when the Times, the code for money in the industry is called exclusivity. If you're prepared to do an exclusive, the papers say, well, we usually pay for exclusives. On this occasion, I wanted no money whatsoever. It is not about money. I've accepted no money. It was actually, none was offered except for the word exclusive. All I said was that I just want to guarantee that the story will run. That was it. So, yes, no, I've received no payments or anything. And you can't do stories like this and break it for money. What would that make me? That would be I'd just be as despicable as all those other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd just like to read out 2 short paragraphs from the original post that you had on 21st Century Wire. The first one is, since the original story I wrote, a lot of readers, people and other members of the media have been asking me to name names and actually accusing me of feeding the abuse system by not naming names in my initial story. So when the Times contacted me, it seemed like the ideal opportunity to name names. So that original quote by you reinforces is what you've just said. And this is one of the key things, and certainly something that the UK column team feel, is that we get mothers coming to us, they're in a terrible state, they're being victimised or something horrible has happened with their children, but they're all terrified of speaking out. And the reason that certainly mothers and fathers are terrified of speaking out in the child protection system is because every direction they move in, social services or child services or the local authority solicitor, they always say, don't talk to the media, don't talk to your family, don't talk to friends. And so the key policy, it seems to me, around the abuse of children is that you try and isolate the children, and you certainly try and isolate the people who would try and step forward to help them. So this business about naming names, people are frightened to name names. A lot of them are embarrassed. They feel terrible about what's happened to them. So it's very difficult getting people to step forward and actually name the names. The UK column for over a year has been dealing with victims of abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, and it's taken enormous courage from some of those young people to actually tell us what they know and to name names, because it's a confidence issue. Have any other victims come forward and spoken to you direct who've experienced trouble within the BBC or the wider media?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I've got emails from friends and stuff who have contacted me, or people who are in the industry have contacted me and said, "Yep, you're spot on. That's exactly pretty much what's happened to me." And good luck with getting the story out, and kind of laughing about that as well, saying it's not going to happen. Well, it is going to happen, because what you need to be first and foremost is not afraid of these people. These people, they may appear very powerful. They may appear to be very big politicians and very powerful people, or very famous actors or celebrities. But in actual fact, they have no power whatsoever. They're very weak, scared individuals, terrified they're going to be found out, in fact. I'm well prepared to be abused, beaten up some more by these people when they kick and scream when they've been named in the newspaper. But I will stand up and name people. I couldn't name them in the original article because Patrick Henningson of the 21st Century Wire doesn't have the capacity to fend off a huge libel lawsuit. And neither pretty much does any other alternative media blogs and what have you. However, doing it in the Times, they told me, and Jack Morgan said, I quote, "We have some of the best lawyers in the world." And of course they do. So that's why I named names in the Times, and that's why it's such a letdown. That's why it's such a betrayal by the Murdoch empire, that when they had their opportunity to out paedophiles and child abusers, they failed the country. Now, what does that say about the Sun newspaper and all the stories that they've done over the years doesn't mean anything. Their reputation is in just as much tatters as the BBC.
Well, I think that's a very strong point you raise. I'm going to be a bit in the middle here and say one of the things that UK column team have learnt over the last few years is the fact that within the media industry, of course, there are many good people and people who do have the courage and the confidence to actually get in amongst some of these very dark subjects to try and get the truth out there. But what they report very often is that they're hampered by a lack of budgets, that many of the media companies simply don't do investigative journalism. So you have good reporters who would do the right thing if they were let off the leash, but they can't actually do their job because they're told, well, there's no money for you to travel. And increasingly, we're picking up from journalists who are talking to us that they describe a culture where you simply go into work to sit at a desk, to feed off internet stories, and then to regurgitate those stories as supposedly the latest hot news. So what I'm really saying is that it's not the whole of the media and the newspaper industry that's bad. There are good people in there, but definitely there seems to be a hand at the top which doesn't want them to investigate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I'm working on a story at the moment about the BBC Trust. The BBC Trust are not representative of the members of the country who pay the licence fee. There's bankers, there's the Rothschilds banker on there, there's various other bankers and what have you. People who own large media organisations are involved in the trust, and also people who are connected with other politicians who have done questionable things. And I'm just wondering, how can we trust the BBC Trust? To actually do an independent investigation. The whole culture of the BBC has to change now, from how the trust delivers. What happens is that we, as individuals, pay our licence fee, and then the BBC Trust says, well, you're not responsible enough to dole out the money to the BBC. You won't understand. You won't know what to do with it. So us private bankers and what have you, and very powerful politicians must spend your money for you. Well, really, the BBC Trust should be made up of members of the public. We could turn it into a TV show, vote for them to go on it or something. I don't know. But the point is that it's from the very top. So the BBC Trust to the Director General of the BBC. I know Mark Thompson very well, who was Director General of the BBC. When the Newsnight item was dropped, he's saying that he wasn't made aware of it. That is absolutely rubbish. Mark Thompson, being the Director General, would have been in touch with his programme directors, especially because someone had an issue over a programme. You've got a Christmas special, the most watched time of year for television, and they're wanting to pull the programmes because of a Newsnight investigation. My first question would be, how bad's the investigation? What's it saying? And of course, I would have been told, and I would have immediately pulled the 2 Christmas specials and ran with the news. So, in other words, in the BBC, live entertainment overrides news. In what universe does Mark Thompson live in where that can actually take place? So for him to say that he's not, he didn't know, is absolute rubbish. He's a control freak. I knew him from Channel 4, and the best piece of advice Mark Thompson ever gave me was, if you can't stand the heat, don't get in the kitchen, kind of thing. Well, the same thing here. He's in really deep trouble now, and he's put himself in a position again where he's claiming, eyes wide shut. I didn't see, I didn't hear anything. Which is absolutely rubbish. He ran that organisation with an iron fist, and I know that from people who've worked in there while his reign was on there, and he cut a lot of jobs and what have you, and really was nothing that he wasn't into. Yes, I understand that he may not have been into the idea of knowing exactly what the investigation is about, because the Director Generals don't. They're the people that captain the ship, kind of thing. They're not to know exactly what each department's doing and when, but he would have known during that period of time when they were looking to pull the programmes and jiggle the schedule. Well, now George Entwistle is Director General. Well, he was programme director at the time. Well, it was his Christmas special that he didn't want to pull. So again, how impartial is this investigation going to be when George Entwistle really is putting himself in the firing line? So even though he's been in the job just a matter of weeks, he really needs to go, and go now, because he's protecting paedophiles and abusers, and I'm not afraid to say that.
Right. Ben, there's another little quote which I'd like to pull off the original 21st Century Wire text. You said it's, let me get my glasses on here, it's all rather easy to pin the entire scandal on a deceased former celebrity like Jimmy Savile, but if you're going to name the names of currently active entertainment professionals and politicians, you have to go with the biggest and strongest media outlet. Now, you've covered really the Times aspect of it, but I'm very interested in this comment that it's rather easy to pin the entire scandal on a deceased former celebrity like Jimmy Savile. Do you think that at the moment there's a skew, a bias being introduced to get us to think that the whole thing is Jimmy Savile? Of course, he's dead, so that's a bit of a problem, but really the whole thing was Jimmy Savile, it was his time, and that's the end of it.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what they're planning to do. However, which is why I came out in the first place, because you've got people, coming out, very, famous people saying, oh, well, you heard rumours and this, something. If you heard rumours, you should have gone and reported it to the police. Just because the BBC has a culture of secrecy and silence, it doesn't mean that you stop being a citizen of the country. You can trundle yourself off down the police station, make a report to the police if you'd seen something. All these people that said they heard something, they saw something, they all need to be questioned by the police and prosecuted if necessary for not speaking out, really, because this is how abuse happens. Now, if it feels wrong, it is wrong. If you're a person who's witnessed somebody going with Jimmy's, let's say, hand in hand, and you think, that doesn't look right, report it to someone. If they're not interested, get out of the police station, report it to police. Keep going until people listen to you. But the BBC at the moment were trying to say, well, look, it's all a dead guy, and Gary Glitter, his mate, so, disgraced and out there anyway. And that's that. We rest assured that the BBC no longer does that. I mean, that's rubbish, because in my day that was going on, and that was later. So from, sort of late 80s into mid-90s, it was still carrying on. I had a personal experience, and so that's why I came up with those articles, simply to say, hey, look, don't let them sweep it under the carpet. It's happening. If it was happening then, it's happening now, and it's going to be happening in the future if it's not stopped. I mean, look, this is Bette Davis, a very famous story in Hollywood, where she was up for doing a movie role and had gone in to see the film executive and had slept with him to secure the role. And that film executive then got fired from the studio during the afternoon, and another one was put in there, and Bette Davis went and slept with him to secure the role. Again, this was standard practice in Hollywood. This is standard practice in this country. Not for everybody. There's many great people in this industry, but it's being spoilt by a minority. And the minority use sex, drugs, alcohol, and you being underage and naive, you don't stand a chance against these people, even though you might think, as I did, that you're a very streetwise, savvy kind of kid. In actual fact, you're stupid. Well, I was stupid. But you stand no chance against these people who are dangling a career on a big TV series or in a movie, as it happened to me many times. Now, I think, again, like I said before, if I was gay, I think I'd have maybe have moved into the inner circles of that. I had a friend who was gay, who that's exactly what happened to him, and he's extremely messed up by the whole thing, as you would be. I saw the outskirts of it and looked into it, and what I saw was terrifying. I only survived it, and I really mean that. That's no exaggeration. I survived being a child actor. Some don't. Simply by keeping my wits about me and being quite mouthy. So when people did try and stick their tongues down my throat at auditions, which they did, when they did grope me at various places, or when I was asked to go into people's private flats and residences to secure the part, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't go, so therefore they left me alone. They don't pursue you, these people. If it looks like you're not going with them, they leave you alone. But because there's so many of them, it just kept happening to me time and time again. And this is just general experience. And all child actors would, in my time, obviously before, would have experienced this now, then. And it's got to be being going on now, because there's even less channels to get the story.
One of the things that we discussed in the news earlier on was the basics that we've got children at the moment in general being sexualised at an ever earlier age. And it's not only sex education, but we now got websites supposedly to give them advice on sex and contraception. But where that's actually taking them is to provide them with a guide to try everything that's possible. This is a liberal agenda, and of course the thing is, and you're describing it really, this liberal agenda has been buried right into the heart of the media system, so that we've got a very, very powerful broadcaster like the BBC, where liberal people can start to skew and put their focus on the programmes they're going to broadcast. This seems to me to be very dangerous. Do you think that, how do you view the BBC's morality? Do you say, well, there's a normal balance of people within the BBC, or would you say that the BBC suffers a glut of people who've perhaps not got the best interests of children in mind?
It's a public schoolboy arena, the BBC is. You know, pretty much everyone who's come through the BBC into a position of any kind of power has come through a public school system, an elite education system. I mean, we all joke, don't we, about schoolboys, you know, and them buggering each other and all this kind of stuff. And this is made to look normal. This is not normal. That's child abuse happening in a school, if indeed that does happen. We know it's happened in the past. So the BBC is full of people who have been through this public schoolboy system, who've been through an elite university education, and they are very skewed. And there is a double standard in the BBC, which is this, is whatever appears on the screen is reality for the public. Yeah? And they are not to see the cesspit that the BBC and other organisations are. And no news gets out about it, so people don't believe you. If I said, look, hold on, you know, I know several famous people who people would go, oh, you're kidding me, why would they do that? Because you don't know them, because, you know, the facade is simply a facade. You don't know that these people are scumbags underneath it. And so the BBC hides it, and that's the double standard. And so really what they're saying to everybody in the country is, do as we say, obviously not as we do, you know, kind of thing, because, you know, it really is a cesspit, you know, and I've known this for years, and, you know, lots of other people who've worked at the BBC know this. And again, it's not everybody has experienced going through. If you're a cute kid, if you're a cute child actor, then there's a good chance that you'll have experienced what I've experienced. If you're a successful child actor, there's a good deal that because you've experienced what I've experienced. There is a lot of power and a lot of control exerted over you as a child actor that you're not really aware of. As an adult, I can look back and go, oh my God, you know, how did I even get myself into that situation? You know, I was attacked in my hotel room by a man who was very famous, who'd come off a big American television series, was doing a play in this country, and I was involved in the next play. So we were rehearsing, and in the theatre while they were doing their show was going to come off, and then our show would go on. So we all got to know each other. You know, he bought me drinks in the bar. I mean, that's the other thing. You know, underage drinking goes on in theatre bars all over the country, and in TV studios all have bars and little clubs inside. So underage drinking goes on. And so I was bought drinks. I got very drunk. I was 14 years old. I then went back to my hotel, taken by him, because we were all staying in the same hotel, all the cast members were. And he came through the door of my hotel room with me and pushed me onto the bed and tried to attack me. And that's pretty much the only time that I was actually really physically attacked. And it had not been for another cast member coming through my open hotel room, hearing the kerfuffle, I do believe that I would have been sexually assaulted, you know. As it turned out, he got up very embarrassed when my colleague came through the door and left, and I was very shaken by that. So, you know, this goes on. This happens, you know.
Yeah.
And
okay, Ben, can I ask you? Did you come across Jimmy Savile personally? Did you?
No. No, I never came across Jimmy Savile. I came across many other people, but he wasn't somebody that I came across. And you know what? Quite frankly, I'm really glad that I didn't.
Right, okay. And did you witness things happening, serious things happening with other children or child actors? Of course, we've got victims from Jimmy Savile who've now come forward who say that they either abused themselves, of course, or they saw other things going on. You mentioned going to parties. Did you see this type of behaviour?
Sure, yeah. I mean, these parties aren't like you and I would have a party. These are serious, these are get-togethers. And in the entertainment industry, get-togethers happen all the time. So at the end of a rehearsal, you might get together in the pub, and then it might go on to a hotel room or whatever. At the beginning of, when you're filming your television program, the first day after you wrap, you'll go off and have a party. At the end of the TV program, you have a party. Parties happen all the time, but they're not really necessarily organised. It's just people going out for a drink, and it carries on. I was invited to really top hotels. I was treated really, like a king sometimes, I have to say, by these people. And you turn up at a hotel room, and it would be a sex party. So, in other words, very sort of famous, well-known people of the day, in my day, very influential people in those hotel rooms, all having sex with underage people, boys and girls. And this, I've witnessed this on many occasions, all at different levels. Some very seedy kind of scenes, some sort of very sort of on the surface very plush, but obviously it's all childish, really. And the way they do it is they get you very drunk and very stoned, and basically you really don't know what you're doing.
And that, from what I understand now, and UK column team have certainly learnt a lot from talking to police officers with experience in this field. Is this, of course, is the standard method of, or a part of the method of grooming of children by paedophiles, is the use of drugs and drink, obviously to break them down and get rid of resistance to what they're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you're talking about people who are very famous, and that's an allure in itself. When you've got a famous person, a world famous person standing in front of you saying, hey, well, look, if you go off with this guy here, he's a really powerful producer. He will really help you. What you're going to say? Okay, I'll go off with a really powerful producer, whether it's male or female. In my case, mainly female. But I went off with males trying to take me off into corners and what have you as well. They want you to perform a sexual act on them. Now you either do, or you don't. If you think, well, they're going to be true to their word, you do. If, like me, most of the time, I just went, I don't want to know. I was there for the party. I thought I was invited to a party, not to, I was very naive. And I got myself into some pretty tricky situations. But that's because the industry is not policed at all. And what I experienced, what I saw going on with, say, models, because, like I said, I did a lot of catalogue work and a lot of modelling when I was a kid, that was just horrific. And you're talking about 12 or 13-year-old girls, but because they're like 6 foot tall, they're very tall. They look older, but they're not. They're just as naive as I was, and they're getting drunk, and they're putting anything up their nose they can get hold of, and they're being abused, and that was rampant, and and still is again. And people don't want to change. They don't want to say, let's not use children under the age of 18 for modelling. No, why not? Oh, because children are so beautiful, because of this, that, and that. So yeah, and that's the problem, is that children need to have a childhood. They need to be left alone. They have no business being in the entertainment industry, from modelling to television presenting to anything. And we should basically, if children want to, as an adult at age of 18, join the industry, go into it, then they can go in there having had some experience of life and, perhaps some more education, and so they'll know a little bit about the situations that seem normal and the situations that don't. You see, the trouble is that a lot of these times you're in a situation, and it's completely normal that you get your clothes off in a hotel room or in an audition in an office, and there's several people in the office, and you get your clothes off for them. That's not normal, and yet it's made to feel normal. It's like, oh, well, if you don't do it, someone else will, and of course, that's what they hold over you. So as an actor, when I was at stage school, it was drummed into you that you did what you were told. You did the best of your ability. You don't ask questions, and you turn up on time with your lines learned, and you did the job the best that you could do. And of course, so when tricky situations happen, you don't complain. You can't complain. You're told not to complain. I complained once about a teacher at stage school, and oh my word, did I get in trouble for complaining. So I got the message, don't complain. And everyone else gets that message as well. Even to this day, that will still be going on. That's exactly how they teach you. So what you get is stage schools really are there keeping the secret for the paedophiles as well. Whether they know it or not, that's kind of what happens. And of course, this goes from the amateur level all the way through the professions. This isn't just sort of big media. This perpetrates everywhere, because paedophiles go where the children are. So from the Saturday morning drama school all the way through to the big productions and very powerful people, you're going to find paedophiles. We've seen it in all sorts of other aspects of life. Why should the entertainment industry be any different? Yeah. And it isn't.
Ben, we've got, just watching the clock, we've got a bit over 8 minutes to go. Two things I just want to ask you a question about is one, there's a lot of concern amongst victims out there that the police are not reliable in investigating these matters. And indeed, we have got some police whistleblowers who are also talking to us about being involved in the investigation of child abuse, child prostitution and worse. And they are then describing that their investigations and the reports are ultimately blocked by senior officers who are either bowing to applied political pressure or perhaps are a little bit too close to the action. What's your personal view on the police? And you've indicated that you've had a bit of contact with them.
Sure. Well, I don't know about any of those cases, excuse me, so I can't comment. But as far as I'm concerned, I think when you make a report to the police, it should be taken seriously. If not, then we ask questions why. This is why we need a free media. I think now that there is such a paradigm shift, if you will, on that the culture in this country is going to change. That paedophiles are not going to have an easy ride of it. I'm bringing people into the light who I've experienced, and hopefully that will open the door to other people doing the same thing in their cases as well. And so if there are police out there who are hampering investigations, and I don't want to believe that, to be fair, I want to believe that the police are going to do their very best in investigating every single one of these cases, especially Operation Nutri. So I don't want to prejudice anything that they're going to do. And however, if by me naming names, they can actually then go and do their job, well, then we can see how well the police do their job as they're doing it. So, I don't want to really kind of say, well, I personally don't have any experience with police sort of disrupting any investigation or anything like that. In this case here, there's plenty of wrong with the police, I know that. And in a democracy, policing should be hard. It isn't an easy job to be a policeman in a democracy. But they're having a really tough time at the moment because they're being systematically taken over by companies like Serco and G4S. And so, there's lots of things happening in our society at the moment that are all backwards, all messed up. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if paedophiles got into the police, because why not? It's a position of power. They can cover things up. So, look, yes, there's going to be that going on, but I want to kind of go in with an open heart and say, look, the truth will set us free, as it were. And so let's name names, let's get the investigations underway, and let's start seeing some of these people, behind bars, if indeed that's what needs to happen. Of course, with proper investigations, there's some of the times that evidence may be given, like say from my experience, a lot of my evidence is kind of, well, I was at a party and it was sort of in the New Forest, or it was in central London somewhere. I can't really remember what day it was because I was drunk and stoned or whatever. Maybe that's not going to be so helpful to them, but at least it will set the atmosphere and the tone, so they understand, this isn't just an isolated incident at the BBC. This is, an industry-wide problem, and hopefully the industry will change. If the industry changes, then the policing has got to change to cope with that, and so on and so forth. So I think I'm the one who's going to put my head on the chopping block and name some names, and stories will be coming out this weekend. Touch wood. I'm just doing. I'm going to be absolutely crucified, I'm sure about it. But I don't care. It's I'm not a paedophile. I want to protect children. I can't understand why people want to abuse children. I can't understand why people want to hide this facts from people, but people do, because obviously they've got something to hide. So I'm prepared to come out and put the cat amongst the pigeons. And at the moment, what we're seeing is all these people are turning in on themselves and fighting amongst themselves at the moment. So hopefully that will continue. We need some more whistleblowers to come out, especially big organisations like the BBC, the Murdoch Empire. Now we realise what they're up to. But I think that will happen once the culture changes. And I think with me coming out and telling my story, that's certainly going to add a little bit, 1%. That.
Well, that certainly seems to be the case, doesn't it? That of course, as victims have come forward, so that it's given other people the courage to come forward and speak. And I think this momentum is very powerful. And I'd also like to say, on behalf of UK Column Live, that we are fully supportive of the work of the police. We're talking to some really great policemen and women, and we know that they are absolutely determined to clamp down on these paedophile rings. I think the thing which has now come out for the general public, and it's been very shocking for some of them, is this fact that the rings are not just grubby old men in raincoats. We're dealing with men and women. We're dealing with people right the way through the social structure. And in fact, it seems that people at the top of the structure with the money for drugs, good time parties and access to children are some of the worst offenders. So, yeah, police, please, if you're out there, we say to you, now is your opportunity to really get in amongst these people and deal with some of these rings. And we need to bring down people at high levels, whether they are within the political system or the BBC or the police themselves or anywhere else. And while you're still online, Ben, I'd just like to mention Bill Maloney from Pie and Mash Films. Bill is a victim himself. Indeed, brothers and sisters were also victims, and he's been working as a filmmaker for many years trying to expose the abuse of children. He's done an excellent documentary on abuse in Jersey, which has caused quite a big backlash because obviously it's ruffling very many feathers. Sun, Sea and Satan, that's Pie and Mash Films. And when I was talking with Bill about what could be done to stop all of these paedophile rings, he believes that we should call for an amnesty so that people who are in the game but not happy with what they're doing can step forward. And of course, whistleblowing on other paedophiles would very quickly start to fragment the rings themselves. Okay, we've got 1 minute 22 seconds. A final comment from you, Ben.
Well, yeah, I do agree with that. And just incidentally about sort of, powerful people with the money to buy drugs. In the BBC's context, they used expenses to buy drugs. So you had quite large expenses while you worked there. So the taxpayer was actually buying most of the drugs for people in the BBC to do this. These are very powerful. These are very educated people, and that's the important thing to think of. These aren't uneducated people. These are highly intelligent people, you'd think, who are involved in this kind of thing at the highest level. And so really, it is very scary for people, but they have no power. They have no power over you. And as long as you're telling the truth, and that's the key part. We're not talking about people making false allegations. The police can deal with those people. We're talking about people who have been traumatized, abused, who are going to tell the truth about these people, and we will bring them to justice. And the only good thing that's happened about the Jimmy Savile thing is that his disgusting life has revealed actually how many victims, and they're obviously still coming forward, but there are.
Ben, I must stop you there. Ben, thank you very much for joining us. We've got to the end of the show. What courage to actually come on air and tell us these things. We can do something about it. Thank you very much for joining us. Talk to your friends, talk to your MPs. Let's stop it. Thank you very much. Goodbye.